Hello everyone, this is Marcel. Welcome back to my channel. It's great to see you here. So for today I want to discuss homewreckers. For any of you that don't already know, a homewrecker in the context that I'm using it is a woman or person that's going to metaphorically step into a marriage or household and break that marriage apart. That is, cause the couple that was formerly happy or close to being happy to no longer be together. Assuming, of course, that it's not actually the person that's married in the first place, though a homewrecker could be married themselves. This topic will be centralized primarily around the type of woman who would do this kind of act and what her motives might actually be. What might cause her to do something like this in the first place. Before we start, let's get something out of the way right off the bat. I'm not concerned what the mindset or the actions are from the guy himself in this kind of a scenario. The assumption here is that he is not the one that is instigating the home wrecking to take place. Yes, I realize people might argue that the guy is married and it's on him if he chooses to stray away from his marriage. And yeah, that's true. It is his responsibility to stay faithfully married. But that's not what we're discussing here. I'm only interested in the mindset of a woman who would do such a thing intentionally. For those who automatically place blame on the male, consider whether or not these roles were reversed. Would the blame still be on the guy? If it were a guy trying to break up a marriage between a woman and a man, would it be the woman in that case? Is it her responsibility to stay faithfully married? Probably not. More likely it would still be the man held accountable. At least that's the typical societal response, right? So for this scenario, let's pretend on some real equality, whereas, some people aren't more equal than others. So I'm going to go over a few of my past experiences, a little bit of my background when I was married. Then I'm going to break down a few of the reasons why I think women will do this sort of thing, and it might not be what you expect. So to give a little context on my experience, I was married for less than 2 years. The relationship itself had lasted for about 4 or 5 total, but it had been off and on the entire time. The whole thing was an emotional shit show. From my perspective, this was my mindset at the time, not how I look at it now. But from that moment, I figured by marrying this woman that it was going to kind of convince her, show to her that I took the relationship seriously and I wasn't just screwing around. The effort from my perspective was supposed to get her to also start taking the relationship seriously. Long story short, it backfired. She actually tried less once we got married, which I'm sure is not a surprise to anyone. We had what arguably could be called an open marriage due to some of her actions, things like hiding her wedding band, not giving a crap about whether or not I went out with other women, almost in kind of a weird way encouraging it. It's almost like she wanted to downsize the entire experience as if it never happened. Then of course, unless it benefited her, and then I was the happy husband. Nonetheless, during those 2 years there were quite regular intervals where I was either separated, openly married, or just very confused. I'm happy to give a more detailed story of my marriage at a later time. It actually gets really interesting, but a spoiler would be that she was only interested in my money and success to support her children. In the context of this video, however, I never spoke negatively about her, especially during the time that we were married, or arguably married. I never took off my ring. I never flirted with other women. It was my first real experience doing something like that with a woman, and I took it very seriously despite the whole situation being really retarded. Prior to that time, I never had difficulty finding a date, not to speak of the quality of the women, but what I found very interesting is from the moment I put on a ring, all of a sudden I had women hitting on me. Now, of course, one could say that I had just stopped approaching them and that piqued their interest or something like that, but it really wasn't how it played out. I went through several periods of time in my life where I was either single, not interested, or just focused on a particular girl and wouldn't walk around giving women all of my attention. If that were the case, then I would imagine I would have gotten propositioned quite a bit more simply because I wasn't giving them attention at those times, and that wasn't how it played out. The point here is that the behavior changed from women around me, and that my behavior seemed, at least from my perspective, to be normal, except that I wasn't going around asking women out. There were a couple of specific situations that I'm going to share with you guys that were the most interesting of them. Firstly, I was approached at work by a reasonably attractive woman. Let's call her a 6. This was during one of the times that I was separated, but like a bleeding heart blue pill cuck, I was still wearing my ring. Nonetheless, I went out with this woman. The plan was to go on a date, go see a movie or something, and then just go drive around, walk in the park. Fairly basic experience. She saw my ring and actually made note of it on several occasions, but didn't directly ask me what the status was of my marriage. Considering it wasn't something I was entirely happy about, I just didn't speak on it. She did go into this date with the mindset that I was married and cheating though, because she mentioned it after the fact. I'll get to that here in a minute. When we went to the movie, she pulled out a bottle of liquor from her purse. I mentioned basically the 3rd time at that point that I don't drink, and she made it a big deal to show me no, that the seal was still unbroken and that it was completely safe, before dumping it in my cup and practically shoving it in my face. Trying not to detract from what was an interesting movie, I pretended to drink some and handed it back to her, where she then complained that the cup wasn't half empty yet. She insisted that she wanted me to loosen up a little bit and that it was supposed to be a good time. In my youthful teenage mind, I shrugged off the experience, thinking that it was just her being awkward. As the night progressed, we wound up at the park, where after a short time of making out, she started to pressure me to go further. When she gave me some of the wrong answers when it comes to things like birth control, I ducked out. I was young, sure, but not completely stupid. By the end of the night, after everything was said and done, she almost proudly asked me whether or not I thought my wife would be upset that I went out with her if she found out. That's when I explained to her that I was in a separated moment when a open marriage and it really didn't matter. She scoffed and said, well, if she had really wanted me inside of her, she would have just grabbed me and shoved me in there. Clearly a very classy woman. I'm sure most of you would say that she was trying to set me up, and I would completely agree. Another situation that popped up was with a young woman I met while I was on active duty. Still the same blue pill Marcel, wearing his ring around everywhere, trying to be a good little snake, despite the marriage back home being in complete and total shambles. Active duty has a really interesting way of screwing with a guy's mind, and while I was there, I wound up talking with this other woman quite a bit. Short but interesting conversations. All the while, she started throwing stronger hints at me while knowing that I was in a married status. It got to the extent of her admitting that she actually wanted me to sleep with her in an effort to get her pregnant. I asked her why she would be comfortable with that sort of idea, and she literally booped me on the nose and said it was so that she would have me. It was as cringe as it sounds. And what the hell is with people booping us snakes on the nose? Stop that shit. It's humiliating. But joking aside, during the time I wore a ring and acted married, I was approached monthly, sometimes even weekly, by various women from different walks of life, and no, they weren't all land whales or dumpster fires. A lot of them were actually really attractive. I don't believe a single one of them wanted a genuine relationship with me. So why does this happen? After I got divorced, life went back to normal. Women stopped approaching me as much. I could still get a date if I wanted one, but for the most part, they stopped approaching me. I thought about that for years actually, long before I ever became a MGTOW. It struck me as odd. Some of the best explanations I could come up with is comparing men, for example, to a bicycle, or some other valuable object left out on your porch. You can leave it sitting out there, unprotected in full view, and it may sit there for several months, even years, untouched and unbothered. But then put a big shiny lock on it, and you'll be surprised at how quickly someone will cut it and then steal the object, whatever it happens to be. See, when it comes to people, especially people who want to take things from others, it's not actually known some of the time how valuable something is before it's stolen. Sure, of course, you have your pro thieves and predators, people that know exactly what they're doing, and a lock certainly is not going to stop them. But most of your thieves and idiots are just that. They're idiotic thieves. The fact that someone bothered to put such a valuable lock protecting a piece of property must mean that that property is then valuable, and is therefore worth the effort in stealing. It'd be no different than if a guy were to consider hiring a $500 escort. Would he still hire her if she were only $5? or free? Probably not in the context of her being an escort, right? The fact that any woman would bother to put a nice shiny lock in the form of a wedding ring on a man must imply that he has some value. And that presumed value is instigation enough for another woman to come and fight for him, try to steal him away. But why would she want to do something like that in the first place? Well, we all know that the acquisition or possession of certain boyfriends, at least from a female perspective, is something of a status symbol. If she has a big, powerful boyfriend or can acquire one, then she's a high-class lady, she's still got it. Wink, wink. A tough-to-get or valuable male is worth more than one that's just more than happy and willing to just jump in bed with her or, throw a ring on her real quick. Kind of a market value argument. So how big of a trophy is a married man? And what does that mean about the quality of the woman who acquires him? Not to mention a fact that another woman was willing to gamble all of her time and energy in being his wife. That alone is a lot of implied value. To speak nothing of the culture and repercussions of hooking up with a married guy, which would basically mean no punishment in her sense, right? It's not like they're gonna do anything to her. Still, the fact that she can land a married guy is almost bragging rights. Not to mention the opportunities a girl has after something like that happens, holding it against the guy to shake him down, rough things up, maybe even just cause a bunch of drama. There is, of course, the possibility that she might actually want to keep the guy after the fact because another woman had him and wanted him, which means in her eyes he must be worth something. Though I really believe more often than not, because of the nature of the women approaching me and their intent behind their approaches, from my experience, it was all sport to them, or very possibly as some kind of source of income. Keep in mind, gentlemen, attention and in some cases drama is a source of currency. Besides, when someone steals a bike off of somebody's lawn, they don't actually intend to ride it around themselves. There's too much liability. Maybe they stole it just to have it. Maybe they stole it to sell it for profit. But there's too many strings attached to ride it around themselves comfortably. In the same sense that a woman may want to steal a man from his wife, or perhaps his girlfriend, though it's not likely she actually intends to keep him as a boyfriend or husband. There are too many strings attached, and people will know the fact that she stole him. Though something can be said about the fact that I was approached more in that, almost 2-year period by women than I was over the rest of the course of my entire life, all put together. Call it a forbidden fruit desire, call it a wanting something that they can't have, describe it however you want. I saw more predatory behavior from those women than I have anywhere else. Now you can chew apart my actions, whether or not I was right or wrong, that whole thing if you like. But in the end, if I had made any mistakes, if I had hooked up with any of those girls in a sense that I would have regretted it, would I have really been the one at fault? Would I have been the one to blame? If those listening take nothing more from this video, I would recommend to be very skeptical when those of the female persuasion try to show interest. Perhaps you have some interesting stories of your own, experiences, things that you have seen. Tell me down below. In the meantime, if you want to hear more content like mine, like, share, subscribe. And until we meet again, this has been Marcel.